Hey friends, welcome to But What If You Did, the podcast where we share the empowering, encouraging stories from millennials thriving in the messy transitional seasons of life. I'm your host, Allison, and I'm a millennial on a mission to show you what's possible when you stop playing it safe and lean into those uncomfortable growth seasons in life. These conversations are literal proof that you too can go from surviving to thriving. It's about building what I call your mindset toolkit and taking action even when it feels hard. And well, on that note, time is our most valuable resource. So grab some coffee and let's get to today's conversation. Hey friends, and welcome back to another episode of But What If You Did? I'm Allison, and honestly, I cannot believe that we have already made it to the end of June. I feel like 2021 is moving at warp speed compared to 2020. Anyone else? Or is that really just me? But anyways, aside from that, I am just so pumped to get to hang with you for a bit today. Hanging with you guys is always my favorite part of the week, and I'm just so grateful to have this platform to connect with all of you. So to give you a little backstory before we get to today's conversation, I was originally introduced to today's guest through a paid membership personal growth community that I'm a part of. She was one of the keynote speakers a few months back, and she did a keynote presentation on gut health and the importance of gut health, and especially how it pertains to females. So this keynote was really kind of the catalyst behind my renewed interest, I guess you could say, in getting to the bottom of some of my own health challenges that have been longstanding and kind of with me for a while. And while that is definitely a conversation for another day, I was just super pumped when I connected with today's guest through a completely different community that we're both a part of and had the opportunity to invite her to be on the show. So in today's conversation, I sit down with Bridgitte Carroll, who is a functional dietitian, an entrepreneur, and business coach, and we are talking of all things abundance and energy. Lately, I feel like I've really been leaning into learning about energy management, and so this conversation definitely felt like a little bit of a sign from the universe that I'm on the right path. It was very timely for me. So in this conversation, we talk about Bridgitte's decision to leave her corporate job in the middle of the pandemic. We talk about how investing in a mindset coach really changed the game for Bridgitte, why you should really always start something before you're ready to start, and how to really embrace those gut feelings when you feel called to pivot or try something new. And as an added bonus, we get a little bit of a mini lesson in masculine versus feminine energy. And if you are not familiar with what that means, listen all the way through because I think this conversation and this mini lesson are really going to vibe with you. All right, friends, I invite you to grab your coffee and let's get to today's conversation with Bridgitte. All right, friends, welcome back to another episode of But What If You Did? I'm your host, Allison, and today I am sitting down with Bridgitte Carroll. Bridgitte, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this podcast. It is an amazing concept and excited to dive in.
So why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about your story and how you got started?
Yeah, so hi everyone, first of all. I'm Bridgitte Carroll, like she said. I'm a functional dietitian, which means I went to school to become a dietitian, and then I decided I needed more schooling and I needed more information of how I could help my clients. So I get to the root cause of any imbalances with my clients. I very much specialize in gut health, but, work on hormones and fatigue and, stress, which we've all been under a lot of this last year. And was working for a lot of different clinics and private practices in the last couple of years. And then when the pandemic hit, I had a huge pivot to quitting my job 2 months into the pandemic and starting my own practice. And within that have had really exciting small pivots, but really during the pandemic, it allowed me to shut off all the noise that I was hearing, shut off all of the expectations and responsibilities and listen to myself and what I truly wanted to do in my life.
I love that. I I love that you started to turn more introspective because I think that that's something that I've noticed with a lot of millennials is like this is the first time where we've really had the noise around us silenced, and I think that that was why so many of us started actually listening to what our intuition had been telling us all along. We had just been too busy to listen to it.
Yeah, and I think like busy, right, is such a badge of honor too, you know? So it's not only are we actually busy, but it's like we even perpetuate, "Oh, I'm so busy." And it's like this thing that we wear and we don't, you know, listen to ourselves. So I think it has been so helpful. I've never heard of people talk about things like meditation or journaling out loud. And now it seems like the whole world, especially millennials, is like, oh my God, this is incredible to listen to myself and what I have to say.
Yes, I think for a long time too, just as a lot of us went through trying to raise our status in the corporate ranks, we were kind of told to keep your opinions to yourself. And the older crowd knew what they were talking about and that you should kind of just sit there and listen. And so we were taught to listen a lot, but we weren't taught to listen to ourselves. We were taught to listen to what other people in the room were telling us. And so I think we kind of fell out of touch with our own internal dialogue. And I think that if anything from came out of 2020, it was definitely to start to listen to ourselves again.
Yeah, absolutely. And my story within like corporate is a little different. I always created my own job within a corporate setting, which is pretty interesting and different. And so I kind of had this like independence, listen to me, even though I'm a 20 something year old woman. So I feel like I was through my like corporate journey, I was cultivating, listen to me, I have something to say, but it was always thwarted by, and this is your salary cap, and this is how you can help people. You can't really think outside the box and things like that. So I felt so limited in myself as a person, but also as a dietitian of what I could do, who I could help, and the impact I could make on myself and my family then with my income.
Yes, I think that the income thing is also a very important part of what a lot of millennials are still struggling with. I mean, we came into the job market during the financial crash in 2008. That was simply when we graduated college. And for those of us that left college a little bit early on an internship or whatever, we kind of got in right at the cusp of when the world was melting down from the financial crash. And we were lucky to have jobs, but then some of our peers came in a little bit later in the job market and then they struggled to find jobs. And I think because of that, it's kind of pushed this boundary of we've struggled with pay for the past decade. And so I think the pandemic kind of really highlighted that for us of how much we've struggled. And what I think is interesting now is we have kind of flipped the switch and we are realizing that we're worth a lot more than people told us we were worth. And the difference is now there's this mindset shift of we're being more introspective and being like, no, I deserve better. And I'm not going to take no for an answer anymore. Whereas before it was like, okay, but someday I'll get to that next step. And now it's kind of, we've drawn that line in the sand and said, nope, this is how it is. And if you want me to work for you, this is what it's going to cost. And if not, I've realized that there's other ways to do this and I'm going to go do it on my own.
Yeah. And even amongst the pandemic, we hear on the news, I stopped watching the news probably almost a year ago because it was so bad. But we hear on the news that we're in an economic crisis and all of these things. But truly, the people who've had money, they've now been not spending for a year and a half. So actually, there is so much money circulating in so many ways to make money. It's kind of incredible that if you get a little creative, if you get a little introspective, how much, and I think of money as just abundance and energy, how much abundance you can attract and create for yourself.
Ooh, I like that you touched on the energy part of that. As somebody who definitely struggles with money mindset things, that's a really good one for me to remember is to think of it as energy because I'm definitely drawn to becoming more intuitive with when my energy levels are up and when they're down and trying to work my work schedule around that. And I think that that is also something that you didn't really hear about a lot until the last year. And you're starting to realize how much science is behind some of these really, really smart things like journaling and meditation and energy management, and how those can not only help you in your personal life, but also in your professional lives at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think as an entrepreneur like myself, and what I teach my business coaching clients is like energy is your biggest asset. And if you're doing things that suck up your energy, or you're undercharging for your services, which again,
Mm.
money is energy. So if your clients aren't giving you an equal energy exchange, you're going to be depleted. And then you can't even have the energy to turn inward to figure out what's your next move? How can I get creative? So I've worked on my money mindset so much. So, um, I'm your girl for that. But there are a lot of things that we learn in our childhood about money or that we've seen. And so to a point, we all have screwed up money mindsets, right? Whether it's I attract a lot of money and it leaves me, or it's hard to make money, like especially in the 2008 crash, right? That was like something that was probably like ingrained in you. And so it's like relearning those things and figuring out what's the reality, and then knowing, which I know you talk about here, you create your own reality.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of what it felt like when you decided to leave your full-time job, because I think another thing that millennials kind of push to the side is our emotions. And so when we're going through something hard, we don't want to think about what it feels like in that moment. And I think sometimes actually addressing and calling those feelings for what they are can help you move past something when you're really stuck. So I'd love to hear what it kind of felt like to you and how you kind of pushed through that initial fear of, okay, I'm going to leave my corporate job and I'm going to start this new thing in the middle of a really scary time.
Yeah, to be honest, I think you hit the nail on the head with fear. I was quote unquote making a good salary. I was just making six figures. And like I said, I had created this position. So that felt good. It felt safe. Um, and I think fear was truly the biggest thing. I didn't realize it was so fearful, but I was scared to leave that paycheck that I could rely on. And when I started talking through it, I hired a mindset coach. And that was really the biggest thing that allowed me to pivot in such a big way. We figured out a lot of my money beliefs that were holding me back from the next step. We figured out that fear and what I truly wanted to do. And hiring her before I started my business was brilliant, because in our first call, she just typed a lot of what I was saying, and I reread it back, and everything that was making me unhappy was this job and how I felt in the job. So I was like, okay, if I listen to this, if I listen to myself say this and I don't quit, like, come on.
I think that that is so interesting because I work with my life coach right now. And oftentimes when I'm like ranting about a limiting belief or a story or something that's like really like eating at me, she'll take notes on the side. And when she reads them back to me, I realize how silly they sound or how ridiculous it is. Or I'm like, why haven't I been able? Oh, okay. Like, and all of a sudden it becomes very clear to me that there is a path forward and that it was like, I literally had to hear it out loud for me to realize that that there weren't all these big boundaries that I was making it out to be in my head. Instead, there was a clear path forward. I just was sitting in that fear cycle and that anxiety ridden cycle, and I wasn't able to see past it because I wasn't talking about it.
Yeah. And that's the introspection part, right? Like, we've never in our lives made time or learned how to evaluate these limiting beliefs about ourselves, about our business, about our future or money. It's just when you have that person that you're able to talk about it with, it's so helpful. It's like life changing in an hour.
I think sometimes people have this fear around investing in coaches. I mean, I certainly did at first. I know it was a big conversation with my partner about, can I spend this money right now? That's another problem that I have. It's just, I feel like I have to ask permission to spend my own money. So that is definitely a part of the money mindset thing that I'm working through. But um, you talked about investing in a coach up front, but I want to talk about a little bit about and dive into a little bit why you think it's so important to invest in a coach and how you've kind of taken, like, I know you've had maybe a couple different types of coaches and how that each coach has kind of helped you to progress your business and how that investment really helped you to navigate this transition.
Well, I actually did an Instagram live about this yesterday, and I was talking about instead of thinking of the how, like when we're going into a pivot in our lives, in our business, we always think about the how, like, how is this going to happen? All of those different things. But what's more helpful is to think about the what and the why. And the what is something that we have to become clear on. What are we shooting for and why are we shooting for it? And the coach will help you with the how, but if you don't have the what or the why, what are you shooting for? So with hiring coaches for me, what it's always been is thinking about my what and my why and making decisions based on that and not truly ever based on money. Because if we think about money as energy, if I want a super high vibe coach that is going to completely change my life, I'm not paying $3,000 for that coach typically, right? And that might, 3,000 might sound like a lot of money to some people, but and maybe that is for the type of coach you're looking for. For me, I've always made the decision based on that, like the what. Is this coach going to get me where I want to go? The last investment I made was $35,000 in a mastermind. And I want, everything in me wanted to puke and die. And oh my God, it was almost as much money as I had in my bank account. But I knew if I wanted to get where I was going, this was going to be exponential growth. And in the next month, I doubled that investment because I knew that was the thing that I needed. So I make a lot of decisions based like my gut. I listen to my gut.
I am also somebody that makes a lot of decisions based off of gut feelings. And every time that I have tried to ignore a gut feeling about hiring someone or investing in a program or whatever, I have regretted it in some fashion because I knew that my gut was telling me that it was the right person, or because you're attracted to people's energy too. Going back to the whole energy thing, like if you really vibe with a coach, you're going to know that like they're going to help me move forward because I just hit it off with them. If you're not vibing with someone, you're not going to feed off of their energy. Their energy is not going to help move you forward either. So I think that that's also a really important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I definitely love that you gained that back double fold because I think it can feel really scary to make investments in ourselves, especially in the current economic situation. We've had it drilled into our minds since we were little kids that you need stability. And I think that has made us a very somewhat risk adverse generation. Like I think that we're all kind of starting to peel back that risk aversion, but I think we have operated from this place of being risk adverse and living with a scarcity mindset around a lot of things for a long time. And this last year, we've just kind of learned that like, oh, if I want to live a fulfilling life, I've got to learn to push past that. So I think that coaches and kind of investments in yourself are really good ways to start to pull yourself out of that redundant cycle we've been trapped in for a while.
Yeah, 1,000%. And when I'm working with my business coaching clients, I'm always, and this is the same work I do with my nutrition clients or my gut health clients. Instead of thinking what not to do, I always think about what to do, right? So instead of trying to push away this lack mindset or judge it or say, I shouldn't be thinking this way, I shouldn't be feeling this way, focus on how you could feel and how you want to feel, which is opportunities are abundant, money is abundant, which is hard to do, but trying to think about what to focus on instead of what not to focus on.
So if we're talking to the millennial that is just absolutely like they feel really drawn to something new, or like I'm not happy in my corporate job, you weren't happy in your corporate job, they're ready to try something new, but they just feel really paralyzed by the beginning steps. Can you share why you feel like it's so important to start before you're ready? Because I think that is something that's really kind of propelled both of us. And I think there's a lot to learn behind that.
Yeah, I think what's starting before you're ready shows the universe or source or whatever you say, God, it shows and yourself that you are going all in on your dreams. And so if we hold ourselves back until the right moment, one, there's never a right moment, but two, you're not moving in the direction of your dreams. And that's, I mean, this whole conversation, that's energy going to the direction of your dreams. If you start, hope to God you never stop, right? Like momentum is wonderful. So I think you've got to listen to your gut feelings on things. And if they're saying something isn't right within corporate or you're drawn to something else, do it.
Just start. I know that like I didn't really know where the podcast was going to start. I didn't know where it was going to take me, but the incredible people that I have met around the country that have become some of my closest friends and best advocates and biggest cheerleaders all came from starting a podcast and talking to strangers on the internet. And I know that that like terrifies people, but like there's so many good things that come from social media. I know we hear all of the bad things that come from social media all the time, but I think that when you open yourself up to new possibilities by just taking a chance on yourself, like you said, the universe does reward you for that. And you see that come back in a lot of different ways.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what social media shows us too is what I call expanders. You can follow people who are doing the things you want to be doing, and they expand what you believe is possible for yourself. So when I'm working with my business coaching clients, I'm always thinking, who are your expanders? Who can show you that what you're doing is possible? Maybe someone listening to this wants to start a podcast, and they're saying, wow, Allison did it, and I can too.
Yes.
So making sure you fill your Instagram feed with people that expand what you believe is possible, not people that keep you in a lack mindset. Unfollow those people. They're not helpful. And find those people who are going to be your cheerleaders and then, be 10 steps, maybe 3 steps ahead of you. And I know I had that when I pivoted too. So I do think that's really helpful to have those people that you're kind of aspiring to do something similar of what they're doing.
I think it's the couple steps ahead person. I think sometimes we like aim for the stars and we're like, well, this is the person with 100 million followers that I aspire to be. But sometimes the person that can give you the best advice is the person that most recently went through what you're going through. So it's about leaning on those resources that you have right in front of you. And I also think that there's this overwhelming fear of just starting conversations with people and I think a lot of that goes back to, like I said, when we entered the corporate culture, we were often told to keep our mouths shut and to sit in the back of the room and to, observe from afar. And I think so many of us have to break down that barrier of just starting to get to know people and realizing that there are more people in the world outside of our circles. And when you expand your circle, it's amazing how life changes.
Absolutely. And I think being intentional about your circle is so important too, right? Like, again, there are people that are going to suck your energy. There are people that are going to give you energy, and it's up to you to decide who you surround yourself with.
Yes. So you've mentioned a little bit about your business coaching, and I know that that was kind of part of how you pivoted and evolved even from when you started your business. I would love to dive into that part of your story a little bit because I think something that you've really excelled at is pivoting your business to scale it in different ways as you've needed to change with the growing times and the economy and just where everything is and falling in any particular month.
Yeah. So I started my business June 2020. And I am a dietitian by trade. I've always mentored other dietitians in the 7 years that I've been a dietitian, and that has always brought me so much joy. And when I started my business, I had really great success at the beginning because I had evaluated a lot of limiting beliefs. I had worked on my mindset. I worked on my worth before I started a business. And in my gut health and nutrition business, people were asking how I had had that success. And it was a different path than a lot of dietitians go into private practice. Typically, they hire, a business coach that talks about strategy on Instagram, or they talk about, I don't know what, email marketing. And mine path was really about my mindset and my energy and getting rid of limiting beliefs. And I was like, had crazy success. All of my mentors are like, you shouldn't have been that successful that quickly. So it was me owning that and being like, wow, I did something that actually not a lot of people do out of the get-go. Not a lot of people have $40,000 months accidentally in their first month of business. And so I realized a huge passion of mine was inspiring other dietitians and coaches and entrepreneurs to do what I did, and how running a business can feel so different than strategy and the masculine and the doing. It can really feel like the being and happiness and balance. And so in December, I was always like I said, I was always mentoring dietitians, and I would charge a really low hourly rate, and I'd be like, yeah, let's chat. And then in December, I started owning what I was really good at, which was inspiring dietitians, health coaches, and wellness coaches to build the business of their dreams. And it has been so aligned. It feels so effortless because it is what I am supposed to be doing in this world.
I love that it comes back to making aligned decisions, leaning into things that feel easy. I think sometimes we want to really overcomplicate things for ourselves, and we say, I don't have a story. I don't have something that makes me special. When we all do. We all have a story within ourselves. We all have some level of something that is unique that we can capitalize on. And I think that especially when you're looking to transition or you realize that you're not happy, it can feel very overwhelming to figure out what that next step is. So I know for you, like it started a lot with like the mindset work. And I think in some ways it kind of, for me, has felt very similar where until I was working on my mindset and be genuinely happy with who I was as a person, things didn't really start to change with me. Do you remember a time where like the mindset shift kind of like happened, like a pivotal instance or story where you realized that like, oh, I can do this differently and it works better? Or those, you know what I mean? Like that kind of pivotal spot that you can kind of go back to.
I honestly feel like that happens on a weekly basis. I do like really in-depth hypnosis meditation almost every day. It's so good. It's from Lacey Phillips is her name, and she has a podcast, Expanded, and I have these revelations actually often because I'm doing the daily work. And so when I think about a really pivotal time, it was with one of my business coaches who I was talking about how successful I'd been in my nutrition and gut health business, but knowing that I wanted to do business coaching. And her answer was, well, just do it then. Just unapologetically make the switch. And my fear was I'm going to confuse my Instagram following. They're not going to know what I'm doing. And she's like, you got to move in the direction of your dreams now, and that doesn't mean always go towards, the shiny object, but it was calling me so much that it was truly all I was thinking about was how can I help dietitians and coaches in this way? And her answer was just do it.
I also think you do a really good job of balancing that on your Instagram of like the dietitian versus the business coach. So did you have any strategy behind how you did that? Or did you just kind of start incorporating both and seeing what happened?
Well, my coach was suggesting, okay, do like 60-40, 60% gut health, and then we'll move to 50-50. And I was kind of like, yeah, sure. I don't even have an Instagram strategy, period. So when he was like, this was a different coach, do this balance, I was like, wow, I don't have any strategy to even know what I'm talking about 60% or 40%. So I just trying to lean into what I felt was authentic and what offer I had at the time or what was on my heart. I will say though, for anyone who's going through a pivot, it does feel sticky. Like it doesn't always necessarily feel like abundance, guns a-blazing, I can do this. It many times feels like, what the heck am I doing? Do people even understand what I'm saying? So I really appreciate your feedback and saying that I did it in a clear way, because it feels hard sometimes.
I think that's the other part of it is like when you're pivoting, like we are such a generation that has been taught to want feedback on everything. And when it's not handed to us, we really don't know what to do because we expect people to want to give us feedback all the time. And I mean, this is speaking more to the entrepreneurial space in particular, but you don't get a lot of feedback at first. You don't get a lot of information back from your listeners and your followers. And, people will say, oh, I'm enjoying the content, but like, okay, so what are you enjoying? What do you want to hear more of? What kind of people are you vibing with? Do you have any recommendations? And you just like, a lot of it falls on deaf ears at first. And it does very much feel like you were doing it for yourself and only yourself. And so I think it's so interesting when you think about it just from a general feedback point of view, because I think that's very much something that we were just taught to look for. And when you kind of have to seek it out in a different way, it's a very interesting mindset shift in itself.
Absolutely. And I think coaches can help with that, right? Like they can give you feedback that your listeners or followers aren't giving you. But at the end of the day, I think the most helpful thing is some type of daily like introspection, whether it's the journaling or meditating, because then you can hear how you authentically want to show up or what you want to talk about or what's on your heart, or maybe that podcast you listen to that people are really interested in about hearing.
So now I'm curious because I'm totally a bookworm and somebody that binges podcasts. What are your favorites?
Oh, golly. Okay, so podcasts. Our mutual friend, Keisha Fitzgerald, great podcast, great woman. For business side of things and money, one of my business coaches, Chris Harder, he has a podcast. James Wedmore. I love listening to entrepreneurial podcasts. Books. Happy Pocket Full of Money is a book I give every single one of my business coaching clients. It's about the energy of money and a little bit of quantum physics, which is actually not interesting at all. Let's see. And if you're in the entrepreneurial space, Traction's really good. Launch. Jen's
Happy
Yeah.
Happy Pocket Full of Money. My life coach just sent me that title and was like, this is a good one for you. You should go read this. I haven't read it yet, but
it will change your life. Get through the first 2 chapters. So the mastermind that I'm in, that Chris Harder runs, we have all read it like multiple times now. And I go back to it on a daily, weekly basis and just read a couple pages. It is life-changing. Let me know how you like it.
Oh, I'm excited now. Something else I want to quickly go back to is you touched a little bit on masculine versus feminine energy. Can you elaborate on what that is a little bit? Because I'm not sure many of my followers will know what that is, but I think it's so, so important when you're learning to kind of structure and drive towards goals to understand that you have both within you.
Yes. Okay. So masculine energy, and this is not a sex. It is just like, it, as a woman, I might be in very masculine energy. So masculine is very much the do, the check the boxes, the pushing a rock up a mountain type energy. It is the doing. And in corporate, you would assume that 5 days a week, you're in a masculine mode, which is why on the weekends, you want to do absolutely nothing and just be and hang with your girlfriends, have some wine, whatever it is, because that's more the feminine. That's the flow. If we think about the masculine and the feminine, we need both. If we think of like a river going through, say, the Grand Canyon, I can't think of anything else, but you have these rocks, which are the structure, and you need those rocks to hold in the river, and the river is the feminine. The feminine is leaning into the being instead of the doing, the introspection, the relaxation. And so as an entrepreneur, what I teach my clients, and I think this will be helpful even if your listeners aren't entrepreneurs, is we have to balance both. We can't always be in the masculine because that's a recipe for burnout and not feeling fulfilled.
The recipe for burnout, that I think is millennials at their finest. We are a recipe for burnout. But I think it is because so many of us lean into our masculine energy so much. And I think so much of that drives from being set up in a corporate environment that is male dominated and for so many of us. And that's just how corporate environments are structured, are with a masculine energy. And so I think sometimes it's hard for us to come home and to decompress and to lean into that more feminine energy. And that's not to say males also need to lean into their feminine energy as well. And I think that sometimes, like when you're surrounded by it all day at work, it becomes very hard to separate. And so I like that you pointed out that on weekends, people tend to lean more into their energy. And I think that something we are all taking away from the last year is that we need to be better at mixing the two. And we need to have better at having downtime and giving ourselves grace and just being okay with not doing anything in other parts of our day other than just the weekends. We need more decompression time and more just go with the flow time than I think a lot of us probably realized.
Absolutely. And I think too, it can be weaved into your day. It doesn't have to be like the work time is always masculine. For the feminine side of things too, it's the creation mode and the flow mode. And I'm sure, when someone's creating maybe content for Instagram or a blog or something like that, it's best felt, it best comes off when you're in the flow and things are coming to you versus forcing it, which would be the masculine. So I have my clients set up masculine days and feminine days. Maybe Mondays are masculine, they're do, where feminine is introspection, content creation, and being, versus the checking the box.
Millennials like to check boxes. That is definitely something we enjoy doing. And I hope that through this podcast, people are learning more and more every week about how to not just live off of checking boxes, because I think there is so much more to life beyond checking boxes. And for as much as it's retraining our own brains about how to not just drive for check boxes, I think it's also this idea of like helping our relationships to learn about that as well, right? And so it's our parents drove us to want to check boxes, but helping our parents to understand that I am still successful, whether I'm checking this box on the checklist of life or not, and that kind of thing as well. So I think it's also an opportunity for us to teach both generations above us and generations below us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes we can think of the feminine and the flow as not productive, when actually, when you start leaning into that more, you find out how productive it is. Sometimes I will do a meditation and that thing I was trying to do, like trying to fill an offer for business coaching or trying to get new clients, when I lean into the feminine and stop going, asking people to join or putting the information out there, when I actually take time off to be, that's when my Instagram fills up with people who want what I'm offering. So it's kind of this, you realize, oh, wow, the feminine is actually super productive because I'm working on myself and I'm taking time away from the doing.
And people are attracted to the energy because you feel like you're in your flow and you feel like you are making aligned decisions, and people come to the right people were attracted to the right energy.
Absolutely.
This conversation definitely went down an energy management rabbit hole, but I'm kind of glad it did because it's a conversation that I've been wanting to bring to the podcast for a while. So I hope that that you guys are all getting a lot out of this energy management coaching, because I certainly am.
Yes.
So something that I like to wrap up all of my podcast interviews with is, as millennials, we are terrible at taking credit for giving ourselves a good pat on the back when we've done something really hard and we've made it successfully to the other side. So when you look back a year from now, what do you think you're going to be most proud of yourself for?
Oh, that's such a great question. Leaning into my gut. I have so many projects going on right now, and they all feel incredibly aligned. And one of my girlfriends who is a functional dietitian, she's very much in a season of life where she's maintaining. She's comfortable. She doesn't really want to focus on growing her business. And if she looked at my business right now, she would be like, holy hell, how are you doing all these things? And I'm doing them all because they're incredibly aligned and I'm loving it. I don't think that I can't have the foot on the brake forever. And I think that's really important for people to know. I have seasons in my business. We have seasons in life. If we think about the seasons of nature, right? We have rest, which is winter, spring, which is a rebirth, summer, which is a fun go, and then we have fall, which is kind of like spring, right? Or I guess fall would be more like we're shutting down. And so we look at nature and we say, okay, they have these seasons. I also have them in my life, or should have them in my life and my business. So for me, January through March was really a resting phase. I wasn't growing a lot. I was very introspective. I was deciding what my next move was. And for the last 2 months and for the foreseeable 3 or 4 months, my foot is going to be on the frickin' pedal. And what I'm going to look back at a year from now is no, my foot was on the pedal for all the right things. Because I made decisions based on my gut, not based on money, not based on what people thought I should be doing, but because I was following what's lighting me up. And I'm really proud of that now. And I know I'll be really proud of it in a year when my company hits 7 figures in our first year and a half. Universe, thank you already for that. So I'll be really thankful for that. And I'm thankful for it and grateful for it now.
And I want to touch on the fact that you just pointed out the seasons too, because I definitely have started to listen to more like nature-driven podcasts and how they talk about the energy in the world and the different seasons, and just like learning to eat within certain seasons and learning to take care of your body within certain seasons. And like there is so much knowledge out there about how when you return to nature, how much that enhances your life too. So I think that that is definitely another path that people should go explore, go be curious about. I think something that I've learned out of this last year is just to be more curious about why things are presenting themselves and why I have a gut feeling, and exploring that gut feeling when it shows up, and just really starting to really embrace the curious lens. So I hope if you guys have taken anything away from this conversation, it's to go learn about energy and being curious and just really leaning into your intuition, because I think that's such an important part of things. Well, before we wrap up, why don't you tell my listeners where they can connect with you at?
Sure. So my Instagram is where I hang out the most. I'm at Well by Bridgitte, and it's spelled a little funky, so I'm sure we'll link it below. And then I will be launching an entire new brand, The Gut Fix. So watch out for that. It has been my group gut healing program and course that's super successful in helping women get rid of their gut issues in a really effective way. And I've decided to create that in its own separate brand. We have, I think you'll be the first person I'm publicly telling this. We will have our own supplement line in the fall, and we are making huge moves. So I invite you, if you're an entrepreneur, follow me along for the business coaching stuff. If you're a woman who's looking to get rid of your gut issues or wants to know more about functional medicine, I'd love for you to join me in learning more about that. And yeah, I would love to talk with you. So just DM me and let me know you heard me on this podcast.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I am so excited to put this conversation out into the world. This has been really fun. So thank you again for hanging today.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thank you so much.
Just wanted to say a quick thank you for coming to hang with me for a bit today. If today's conversation vibed with you, I would so appreciate if you took a few seconds to subscribe, rate, and review. This really helps to get the podcast into the hands of new listeners. For show notes and links to all resources discussed in today's conversation, head on over to butwhatifyoudidpod.com/listen now. Remember, friends, it's truly on us to inspire the next generation of change makers. So I'll leave you with a little food for thought. It's one thing to change our world. It's another to change the future.